Writing Freedom. Chapter 1. After 10 years at the orphanage. Charlotte wasn't like most girls her age, and who knew if was growing up like a fallen along puppy in a pack of ruffian boys. Of it was just her own speed and fire, but she never had a doll or a tea party. She couldn't sew a stitch, and she didn't know a petticoat from a peapod. Wild hair sprang out of her brown braids, and her ribbons danced on her waist until mm, her frock was too big and hung like a sack on her small frame. Smudge of dirt always covered her, and instead of girl-like face, for as long as everyone could remember, she wore a strip of leather rein tied around her waist. Charlotte's greatest misfortune was that Mr. Boyle, the cook, had been put in charge of her, with the shape of and personality of a very large toad and without a mothering bone in her body. Mr. Boyle certainly was going to teach Charlotte how to be ladylike. She couldn't be bothered with Charlotte, except to order her around the kitchen, and although Charlotte knew how to boil oats and make mush for an army, and could peel mountains of potatoes and scrub pots and pans, Mr. Boyle still yelled at her for the little things, for being too noisy or too quiet, or for gazing out the window and some horse in the pasture that need to be ridden. Being in the kitchen was a thorn in Charlotte's side, as she hated it worse than falling in a real briar patch. Every day Charlotte did her chores in the kitchen as fast as she could. Then she hung up the apron and headed for the only place that made her happy, the stables. The stables. Today, Charlotte hurried there with one thing on her mind, winning the pasture race. As soon as Charlotte approached, the horses stand moving toward the gates and hanging their heads over to pet it. The smell of the sweet dank hay and the horses comforted her like an old quiet on a cold day. The elderly stable master was ringing the stalls. Hi, Bern. Is Freedom ready for the race? Miss Charlotte, that horse is always ready to run, and as much as she takes a shine to you, I expect you could tell her to the moon and back. Vern was tall and thin, with leathery skin the color of coffee with no milk. He tended the stables with a quiet, gentle nature. He didn't talk much to everyone else, but he loved to tell Charlotte stories, most of them true, that left her in a spell with the mouth wide open. Bern has named all the horses himself. He always said that naming something was important, that a name ought to stand of something, and that horse should have a fine name fit for a fine animal. So the horse and all so the horses all has names like Justice and Hope and Charity and Bern, and a story that went with every one of those names. Hope for waiting a better life when he was a young slave on a plantation in Virginia. Charity because of the kindness of the people who had helped him through his struggles. But the story that Charlotte became of most was the one about Freedom. Freedom was Charlotte's favorite horse. She had watched her riding a few years early and babied her ever since. It was on freedom that Bern taught Charlotte how to write. She often pestered Bern from the story about Freedom's name, the story of how Bern ran away and hid in a root cellar with nothing but an old shirt to keep him warm, ran all the way forth so he could be free, and name a horse Freedom for something he won. You gonna beat William in the race today? Asked Bern. I am too. He deserves to be taken down a peg. William was 13 and he bullied the young boys. He threw rocks at the cats and kittens. He wiped the horse and he couldn't stand that Charlotte was better than he was at climbing trees and riding horses. I expect you will, said Bern. Freedom trusts you. William's riding Justice, and Justice just as soon threw him off. That boy is full of no respect of horses. You know what I always say? Charlotte knew it in her heart. A horse rides the way it's riding. It's ridden, said Charlotte. Bern nodded his head, and Charlotte led Freedom from the stall. The pasture fence was already lined with boys sitting on the top rail, waiting for the races to start. Mr. Milkshark, the overseer, walked up and down in front of the starting line waiting for the riders. He was the shortest, fastest, most mean-spirited man that Charlotte had ever known. His beard and hair were almost the same color and his dimpled white skin, and he reminded Charlotte of a popping new potato. Mr. Mr. Milkshark was in his glory during pasture races, instead of his usual scowling self. He paraded around with a smile stuck on his face, clapping people on the back and shaking hands all around. This was in his opportunity to show off and to let people think that the orphanage was a decent place with happy children. But Charlotte and the other knew the truth. The orphanage was nothing more than a work farm, and no matter how young, every child worked hard. Mr. Milkshark saw to that. Charlotte walked toward the pasture, leading Freedom on a halter. The horse nudged her as if to hurry her along. The boys from town laughed when they saw Charlotte. He ignored them and headed toward the starting line until William and a group of boys blocked her away. No girls allowed, said William. Charlotte tightened her furs of plant her feet. She pursed her lips and glared at William with the piercing blue eyes. Get out of my way, William, she said. Some of the boys stepped back. They had seen a look before. With disgust, he said, suit yourself, but you'll be sorry. The riders mounted and raided the horses. Mr. Milkshark raised the flag. Go! He yelled. The riders hauled on their horses and pressed them to start running. Charlotte let Freedom start out slow, saving her for a spurt near the finish. William was close behind. Soon the two rode neck and neck, but the second lap Charlotte let William take the lead. Charlotte knew her horses. Justice was a dobbing, gentle and hard, and didn't take keenly to being riding hard. William was pressing him, and the poor horses would tire out soon. As they approached the final turn, Charlotte gave Freedom full rein in a blinding gallop. With her long braids waving behind her like two thick ropes, She paced William and crossed the finish line 2 lengths ahead. The townspeople clapped, and Charlotte heard the boys from the orphanage give a wild cheer. She knew why. Most of them had bet money on her to win. Charlotte slowed Freedom and walked her around the pasture. The horse was breathing heavy and whistling. She laughed more than usual and felt warm to warm. Bern should take a look at her, thought Charlotte. As she got near the fence, a man and a woman waved at her. Hey there, called the man. Hello, said Charlotte. You're a good rider, said the woman. Thank you, ma'am, said Charlotte.